You're a jerk. Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, please subscribe. I'd really love that. If you're returning, how you doing? Grab your coffee, maybe a snack, and let's get into it, all right? So, what we're going to be talking about today is some myths that have been debunked, okay? These are EMP myths, and I know that a lot of people, this is one of our greatest fears as people of the prepared mind is an EMP, okay? Now, the one, that is more popular is called the Teotwaki, or however you say it, Teotwawki, whatever the hell it's called. I can't say it. I'm not even going to pretend to know or think that I even had to say it, so don't come for me. It doesn't roll off the tongue like butter. It really doesn't. But there's actually a really good reason for why this is one of the most popular events discussed within our community, right? As it is one of the more credible major disasters that could actually strike. There are several bad actors, if you will, in the world who are capable or nearly capable of committing this atrocity. And some have actually publicly stated that this is their intention. Okay. So countering that, our anti-missile defenses are woefully inadequate. And the defenses we do have could easily be defeated by the simply sending several missiles our way, and they wouldn't all need to be tipped by nuclear warheads either, as our efforts to destroy the first several would use up our anti-missile defenses anyways, leaving us vulnerable to any that would follow. So, should we ever be attacked by an EMP, it is clear that the impact on our electrical grid would be absolutely devastating. Now, the biggest risk is that it would destroy the 55,000 electrical substations by melting down the transformers. And those transformers are all custom made for the specific substation. Therefore, there is no backup supply of them. With only a few manufacturers to actually choose from worldwide, it is doubtful that they could all be replaced within, say, a decade. But that does not mean that every piece of electronic equipment in the country would be fried, as some people may think. Now, an EMP operates under the same laws of physics as radio propagation. It's not same like a magic genie that can destroy at will. It's not how it works. There's actually much more that will actually survive than most people think. Now, the first myth that we're going to be talking about are that all cars and trucks will just stop running. Now, one of the first things that, a lot of people think of is that all of the cars, all of the trucks, all of this, they're just going to stop running, as if that would happen just boom, done, right? But according to the EMP Commission, which did a fair amount of testing on vehicles, it looks like most vehicles will continue to run. Granted, their testing was inconclusive, but it was non-destructive, if that makes sense. They stopped upping the level of the EMP when cars stopped running, but in every single case, the car restarted without needing repairs. So if the EMP were severe enough, some might not restart, especially cars with plastic bodies. Let's just say that. So One of the things that protects cars and trucks is that most have metal bodies, making them rolling Faraday cages. So while the EMP can still get through the windshield, where it could attack the electronics, say like under the dash, like your radio, that, okay, and like follow the wires to the car's computer brain. But that depends on whether the windshield of the car is pointed towards or away from the EMP when it happens. All right, so the big problem is going to be coming up with fuel for the cars and the trucks. Refineries won't be working anymore, and the fuel that is in the storage tanks will probably be seized by the government. So the only fuel that may be available is what is stored in underground tanks at gas stations, and the problem there will be pumping the fuel out of those tanks. All right, so the next thing is, the next myth is that airplanes will just fall out of the sky. This is another common myth, that airplanes will just literally just plop right out of the sky, okay, killing tens of thousands of people and starting massive fires. But airplanes are even more perfect Faraday cages than cars are. But not only that, the way that airplanes are designed, especially those used by like the military and the airlines, they are tested for EMP resistance. Yeah. Because the airplane is not in contact with the ground. All right. So any EMP that hits, it will travel over the skin of the airplane and continue onto the ground. Lightning does this like all the time without impacting the airplane at all. For an EMP to get to the electronics inside of that plane, they would have to be attached to the ground. And the big problem for pilots would be that all of the navigational aids, as well as like the radios for air traffic control and stuff like that, that'll likely go out. But leaving them to fly by eye, okay, and by the seat of their pants, really. So while they are trained for this, there's a lot of risk involved, especially as they get like closer and closer to the airports. Now, with many of the planes trying to land and without air traffic controllers, pilots will have to be extremely aware of their space around their planes in order to avoid accidents with other planes. And one private plane ducking under a wide body to land could start a chain reaction of accidents. But of course, you have airplanes that are on the ground will probably be rendered useless as they are typically grounded for fueling operations. And not only that, it'll be more or less impossible to refuel those planes anyway once they are on the ground. So the third myth is that cell phones and tablets won't work. And those are actually small enough that they probably won't be able to absorb enough of the EMP to destroy them. The exception to that might be those which are plugged in and recharging. Yeah. That our phones will still work is somewhat of like a mixed, it's like a mixed bag, as like the cell phone network will be down. So all that we'll be able to do is like use the apps that are already like installed on them. Does that make sense? Like that could be like useful, assuming that we have apps installed which don't need access to the internet and yet will help us survive. And charging them might be a problem. But for like small electronics, the thing that makes the biggest difference is in EMP survival is whether or not there are cables connected to that device at the time that the EMP hits. Okay? So, because it's acting like as an antenna, like a whoop, and when the EMP hits that antenna, which is your charger, will come down and in through the charger and hit the phone. Okay. Now, I'm not sure if like a TV would survive, but let's assume that it will, right? That is, it could, if it was just standing there on the table and not connecting to anything, like it's not plugged in or anything like that. But if it's hooked up, it would be destroyed because the listen to me, E2, number 2, E2 EMP pulse traveling through the power line and the E1 pulse being absorbed by the connecting wires traveling down to them, to the sensitive circuitry inside the TV. Okay. Now, the fourth myth is that all computers will be fried out too. And lots of people have like older computers, right? And other electronics that are stashed away in like a closet or a basement or whatever. As like with the cell phones, those are not always connected to any wires in the most cases. Like the case of like a desktop or something, or towers, the computer is made of steel, making it a Faraday cage. So while the computers sitting on our desks will likely be fried, the old ones that they replace will likely survive if we can just find a way of producing power. We'll be able to use the computers again, and that probably means like using older versions of software, and it will be without the internet, but it could still be useful to you, So the next one is the fifth myth. And it's, it'll be impossible to replace electronics. Okay, well, every scenario that I have ever read, like every book and stuff like that, like 1 second after, like that book. Okay, let's just take that for example. For post-EMP world, shows that people try and survive without any electronics at all. And if they come up with any means of producing electrical power, it probably happened because they drew their own wire by melting down copper wire that had been melted by the EMP, and then drew out that into that wire from which they made their own generators, right? Lots of work, lots of brain power too, But the one thing that everyone seems to forget is that our country is filled with warehouses, most of which are metal buildings. Since the products stored in those buildings are packed in styrofoam and then cardboard as well, they are insulated from the building itself. In other words, what we have is a huge Faraday cage, which is the metal building, the warehouse, packed full of brand new electronics still in the box, which are cushioned with styrofoam and cardboard. So the first problem is going to be finding what is available in those warehouses that is actually useful. Then it'll be a matter of getting the owners of that property to release it so we can put it to use. Okay, so now the sixth myth is that no power plants will survive. Okay, well, the idea that all power plants will be destroyed is a bit questionable. The big issue is actually that the substations will be destroyed, that not all the power plants will be destroyed. And some sorts of power plants, like hydroelectric, wind, are largely protected from an EMP by the way that they're built. While it is still possible that an E2 pulse, which will cause like a huge electromagnetic surge, resulting in a huge electrical surge in our power lines, will destroy power plants, some may well survive. So, of course, then you have power plants that survive without substations, meaning that making any electricity that they are able to produce will be difficult at best. And all it would really take is some like first class like scrounging around to find some like undamaged power pole, transformer, and the wire to hook them back together, you know, but you would have to have somebody who has worked for like the electrical company in order to get that done, because, you know, I wouldn't know how to do that. I don't think the average person would know how to do that unless they were trained in that. So then the seventh myth is that nuclear power plants will blow up. All right, well, along with that belief that all the power plants will be destroyed, there are also people saying that, you know, power plants will be destroyed, and, you know, that there's going to be accidents and blow-ups and blah, blah, blah. So the thing that most people don't realize is that nuclear power plants are about as isolated from the world outside their walls as you could possibly get. And their computers are not connected to the internet as a safety precaution. And the buildings themselves are largely made of steel reinforced concrete, making them themselves Faraday cages. And the electricity they use is generated in-house, so they are not dependent on any outside power source. About the only thing that an EMP could do is send a surge up the output lines. But if anything is capable of accepting that surge without melting it down, it's a power plant. So the eighth one is that solar panels will fry. All right, well, speaking of, you know, producing power and all that jazz, right? There are many people who think that their solar panels will fry along with everything else, right? So surprisingly, though, solar panels are fairly EMP resistant. While they will receive some damage, that amounts to about 10% or less of their output. Now, since those panels are designed with a large buffer to make up for power loss, they will still be producing enough power to run most of what they did before. The tricky thing here is that the solar charge controller and the voltage inverter are likely to be damaged by the EMP while like the solar panels and the batteries and stuff like that survive. So it will be necessary to store spares for those two devices in some sort of Faraday cage, right? So the last one is that there will be lawlessness and general breakdown of society. All right, well, part of that is based upon the belief that most government officials will abandon their post in such as time, either due to stress and their ability to effectively cope with the situation, or due to them not seeing any way of surviving if they do their jobs. So personally, I think that our public servants are more responsible than that. I don't know. I mean, maybe not this administration. Maybe the next administration will be more responsible than that. But, I mean, you can't say the same thing for all politicians. You know what I mean? Who are their bosses? You know, puppets and whatever. You know, but let's just assume that these people are right. And all the officers in our local police departments turn in their badges and go home and take care of their families. What would happen then? If we go back in history far enough, there was a time in this country where there were no law enforcement officers. And in those cases, the people policed themselves, either like vigilantes or concerned citizens taking turns on patrol or whatever the case. Okay. There was enough good law-abiding citizens with freedom sticks, freedom seeds and boomsticks and blah, 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 to take care of the community. So even if the lawless amongst us were to try and take over, there are plenty of people who would gather together to stop it. You know, I mean, some of those groups might be surprising, like the local church ladies, you know what I mean? But they'll be there. You can count on it, you know? All right, guys, I'm out of here. I love you. I'll see you in the next one. You stay safe, you stay positive, you keep prepping, and as always, fearless. Ciao.